Welcome back to another episode of APolitical. I am your co-host, Alan Srochi, and
I'm your other co-host, Tyler Goldberg. Alan, seems like a few weeks since we've been in the studio here.
yeah, you know what? Like we've lost some hair, but not in the ways we feared. You know, since the last time we were here, new outfits, which is great.
That is great. I came very close to wearing the same shirt today just for the bit, but I thought people wouldn't understand that I was joking and think that I only owned one polo.
The folks at home wouldn't really.
They
get
would.
that one.
They would.
No. So we have an interesting topic today.
Yeah.
Like something that we've touched on like a little bit here and there in other iterations of this show. There was a news article that caught our attention this week.
Yeah, it came out of Indiana. So, I mean, I guess if you want to do a little level setting,
Sure.
one of the themes we were asked a lot about at the beginning of this year was AI and its effect on political advertising and how we thought that would manifest itself this cycle.
Yeah, and there were a lot of, I think, well-founded concerns that political advertising, which is, already pretty volatile in nature, with the introduction of generative AI would make for a very chaotic election cycle. And on the whole, just before we even get into this, we really haven't seen a lot of it out there. We haven't seen a lot of ads making use of deceptive imagery like this, and there's definitely examples, and we'll talk about the ways it has been utilized in this cycle and what we think might come next. But the story we're talking about today, it came out of the Indiana governor's race. Candidate for governor Mike Braun is recently, I guess you could say under fire for this one. He has a campaign ad out right now where he has used AI to superimpose images on his opponent, Jennifer McCormick. She has a bunch of signs in the background from a press conference that she gave, and he used AI to replace what those signs said, and I can't really remember what they were supposed to be.
Right, it changed it from signs for her campaign,
to
a slogan.
That the right has used against the left in certain campaigns. I think it was, we're going to ban your gas stoves, something along that line.
Ban all gas stoves.
Ban all gas stoves. And it was shot, it showed up for like maybe 2 seconds at the end of the ad, but it caught the attention of the McCormick campaign and a lot of observers in Indiana. And it is one of those prime examples that we have seen to date of AI being used. And I wouldn't even say it's egregious in terms of creating images out of nowhere. It's an egregious use of AI for sure. But I think we want to spur a larger conversation about its uses in the campaigns.
And it's a really interesting case that this happened in Indiana because there are laws on the book against false advertising and use of AI in advertising that open, theoretically, depending on your interpretation of the law, open the Braun campaign up to legal challenges directly holding them financially responsible for this. So there hasn't been a lot of movement on that yet, but it's interesting that, these are some of the ways that we maybe didn't expect the after effects of AI. So I know there was a lot of news earlier in this cycle. Ron DeSantis's super PAC famously ran an ad that used in sort of AI-generated Donald Trump voice of things that he had written but not said. Right. And that was sort of the first salvo there.
Yeah, that was an interesting use case. I know that there was another PAC that kind of went after Tim Scott and Nikki Haley in that Republican primary and basically made it like a game show of sorts where they were raising their hands to certain policies that their opponents were accusing them of endorsing, but it was not their voice. We've definitely seen, AI's use in that sense in radios. There was a very popular, or I wouldn't say popular, a very prominent story in New Hampshire during the Democratic primary of a Joe Biden robocall going out, telling voters the wrong election day, which was
trying to suppress. And
that took it a step further.
Yeah, because that's actively trying to suppress the vote versus theoretically you could make the argument that you're just trying to make the most impactful ad.
Yeah.
Where I think it's interesting is because again, that was the number one question on a lot of people's minds and I think a lot of that had to do with the timing. This election season really kicked off around when ChatGPT and other sort of forms of AI were in the news. So it was an easy leap to make. I think there are a couple reasons, and you and I have talked about this, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Yeah. Why not? Why was this not the AI election that I think a lot of people were expecting?
Well, I think on the onset, the reason why people were so afraid that it was going to be is because of the old adage that technology is always moving faster than government. And the federal government at the time of the beginning of this election cycle, they had really not made any movements on placing protections in place for stations to run ads that had AI messaging in them. There was no laws that said that you can't do it. Now, stations themselves were kind of self-policing this. Certain ones said that we won't accept any ads that don't have a certain disclaimer on the bottom. Some people felt that wasn't far enough, that even an AI disclaimer shouldn't be enough to justify the use of generative AI in advertising.
And it goes into what we talked about 3 weeks ago, about sort of the segmented nature of a lot of these regulations, and how a governing body like the FCC has put itself into a box where it's decided it can only regulate linear ads.
Yes.
So if I want to run that same AI-generated ad on digital, it's up to the platforms to decide.
And that's, pretty much like...
And I personally don't think that's fair to the platforms.
No, it's not.
And not fair to the voters either.
But it's symbolic of just like... Again, this technology kind of like it's moving very quickly, and the ways that we're regulating it is as fractured as our media landscape.
Sure.
It's fractured in how it's being regulated. It's up to the states on a case-by-case basis to establish their own rules and guidelines about the use of AI. It's up to the platforms themselves. The FCC has their they do have regulation in place that sort of lays the groundwork for this type of stuff. It's not really in full effect for this campaign cycle, but like we're also like you said, social media platforms have to self-govern themselves on this as well. Right. And I know that Meta has come out pretty strongly against the use of AI, generative AI messaging in their digital advertising. We'll see exactly how much will be used after an analysis is done after this election cycle to see how frequently it popped up. But it's very fragmented.
I also think, one of the things, the nature of political campaigns being sort of large PR operations, if you will, campaigns don't want to be called out for using this type of technology.
There's societal pressure.
I think there's an interesting reason, and that's why the Mike Braun story in Indiana sort of stuck out to us. There's an interesting reason a lot of these stories have had to do with issue expenditure groups, independent expenditure groups.
That's a very good point.
As opposed to candidates.
That's a very good
because
point.
It's less of a putting your name, putting your seal on it. The one thing I sort of want to caution, though, is this election cycle not becoming the AI election cycle was from luck and not from strong, strict regulation. And there's only so long you can count on these political advertisers to do what they think is the right thing. And so I fear that we're sort of going to rest on the fact that AI really didn't turn out to be this election cycle as big of an issue when it comes to sort of creating ads. We'll talk about other uses for it in a minute. But I don't want us to rest on that. And I don't want the regulators to say, well, this market seems to have regulated itself. We got lucky that it didn't.
And I think that kind of lends itself to the conversation around AI. And look, we're experts in politics and political advertising. Not necessarily when it comes to AI, but
sure.
But I don't think there's really anyone out there that can claim to be an expert in that particular field at the moment. But I think there's just a general sentiment where people see AI images and they will maybe notice a finger out of place, or they might notice jumbled up words, and they're just like, well, this technology, look how easy it is to spot it. That's not. We shouldn't be all that concerned. But frankly, it's not about what we're seeing now. It's about how quickly we got here.
Sure.
And I think that should be of note to people about. We have another when the midterms come up 2 years from now, the advancement in generative AI will be far greater than what it is now, and regulation will be necessary by that point.
And if we're still in a place, and this is one of the things you and I have talked about a lot, that sort of regulating AI or forcing a disclaimer, that's the low-hanging fruit here. That is something that they should do, and they still haven't managed to do it. What does it say that in that 2026 election cycle, and again, this goes back to our past conversations, that an even greater percentage of political spending will be untraceable. So not only are you going to have to question what's real, what's fake in some of or what's AI generated in some of these ads, you're not going to be able to see, in many cases, who funded them, where they are, and how much they cost. And I think that that's a really, really scary place, especially in a country that is as primed for mis and disinformation as we are. I think there's certainly going to be a hectic lead up to the election. Again, we're talking about this up to now. This is
we've got a month
early
to go.
October.
We have
a month to go. Someone could drop a new AI generated ad.
An October
tonight,
surprise.
An October surprise.
Yeah.
But this is not to say that AI is useless when it comes to political ads. Not at all.
No, I don't think anyone would claim that.
So what ways do you see it sort of being useful if we're going to say that at least up until the first week of October 2024, it hasn't been.
Well, I mean, look, I think it's just another conversation about AI's like usefulness in general. We're talking about the scary components of it, where like, creating fake images or creating fake voiceovers of like people saying, things that they never said. AI in a more practical sense is definitely used in the advertising world in general. You can use it to kind of create, to really accelerate micro-targeting, creating ad tracks that have very unique messages to very niche groups of people. I'm sure that that's actually already been used in this cycle. I think it's the more benefits of AI, not only in our industry, but in any industry, is procedural. And it's a tool to help, accelerate the ways in which you're able to activate certain campaigns and reach specific audiences that, are more important to your specific campaign.
I 100% agree. I think it is something that, again, we've talked about the ways the political media landscape sort of follows, albeit slightly delayed, the brand space, and I think you've seen that in the brand space, and it will continue to expand in the political space. All that we know is that there's a lot to say about this issue.
Yeah.
It's something that's interesting, and as you said, there's no one that's yet an expert on this specific niche use for this tool that is getting exponentially more advanced every day. So it's definitely an area I know we're going to continue watching. Yeah. We hope you continue watching.
The folks at home.
The folks at home. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of APolitical. We'll catch you next week.